Sheni?
Yes, we're on Maaser Sheni, Gimel Yud Gimel.
I wonder if they have a thing like on Waze where you can change the voice. Very good. Beit Shammai says he must open and empty into the winepress, but Beis Hillel says he must open but not empty. Where does this apply? In places where they are generally sold sealed, but when they are generally sold open, the jar does not become non-holy. But where they, non-holy. However, if he wishes to impose a stringency on himself and sell by measure, the jar becomes non-holy. Reb Shimon says likewise, if one says to his fellow, "This jar I am selling to you without the jars become non-holy." If one takes Maaser Sheni produce from an expensive place to a cheap place, or from a cheap place to an expensive place, he redeems it at the price of his place. If one brings produce from the threshing floor to the city, or jars of wine from the winepress to the city, the profit belongs to Maaser Sheni and the expenses out of his household. Maaser Sheni may be redeemed at the cheap price as the shopkeeper buys, but not as he sells. At the rate the money changer accepts small change, and not at the rate he provides small change. Maaser Sheni redeemed according to the valuation of one witness. If its value is not known, it must be redeemed according to the valuation of three. As for the instance, wine that has formed a film, produce that has gone bad, or coins that have rusted.
Okay. Um, so now we're talking about redeeming the Maaser Sheni. So Balabai, so the owner of the produce says, "Besela, right? I'll redeem this for a sela."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Echad Omer and Acher, and another person comes along and says, "No, I want to redeem this Maaser Sheni for you. Allow me." And he says, "Also, I'll do it for a sela." Baal Habayis Kodem. The mitzvah falls on the Baal Habayis. Why? Because as we're going to learn at the end of this Mishnah, the owner himself, when he redeems it, he has to add the fifth, which is actually 25% of the principal, so that the fifth is the fifth of the final number. Okay. Um, okay, so he has precedence. However, Baal Habayis Omer B'Selev, Acher Omer B'Selev Isar. He adds on 196th. An Isar is 196th of a seller because there are 4 dinarim in a seller, and a dinar is 6 ma'in, and a ma'a is 4 isarim. So you can do the maths: 4 times 6 times 4, 96. So just one fractional amount more. We say it shall sell isar kodem. Then the other person comes first, even though the chomesh is going to be way more than that. Because he's adding onto the principle. Now, why we'll see in the coming Mishnayos that in the case of Maaser Sheni, we don't get all excited about the Chumash because Chazal actually made a way that you can get out of giving the Chumash. So when somebody wants to give the principle, give a little bit more on the principle, then we listen to the guy who wants to give more on the principle, even if it's just a fractional amount.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. הפודה מעשה שני שלו, מוסיף עליו חמישיס, בין שהוא שלו, בין שניתן לו במתנה. So this really should have been at the beginning of the Mishnah, but it says if when you're redeeming your own Maaser Sheni, you add a chomesh, whether it was his originally or whether it was given to him as a gift before it was liable to Masras. Before it was, at least before. Matana Kamashin, Matana Odam Betivlam, yeah, when it was still table. Right. So before the masters were taken out, it came into his property basically, and it's considered his, and he has to add the chomesh. So now Mishnah Dalet comes and says, "Mariam and al Maaser Sheni, you can do trickery on your Maaser Sheni, and thereby avoid having to give the chomesh." Okay, Ketzad. Omer Adam Livno Ulavito Hagadolim. He said a person can say to his children who are bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, or to his eved or shifcha who are Jewish slaves, because he doesn't own their bodies, and they don't have, like an eved Kanani has the din of like yadot yad rabo, and the same goes to small children. Whatever they pick up belongs to him, so he can't do this with them. He has to use a third party. And he can't use his wife either because Ishta could go for.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay, so he says to them, "Hey lach maos elu ufedei lach maaser sheni zeh." He says, take this money over here, and you can and redeem the maaser sheni over there. So here's some money for you, and you can have the mitzvah of doing the pidyon, and therefore he doesn't have to add on the chomesh, because now it's somebody else redeeming his produce. So so that way he gets out of having to put in the chomesh as well. אבל לא יום כן לבנו ולביתו הקטנים לעבדו לשבחס הכנענים מפני שידן כידו. But he can't do this with his minor children under the mitzvah, and he can't do it with his non-Jewish slaves because their hand is his hand.
And there's no fifth involved here with the son.
That's right.
Right.
Exactly. That's the point of doing it, is to avoid paying the fifth, because now it's now a third party who's coming and redeeming his produce, and therefore they don't have to pay the chomesh. Okay. Now, all that's great. Now that's if he's got the money on his person. But let's say he's standing in his threshing floor, and he looks in his pocket and he doesn't have the money, and he knows that the money's in his house, but he wants to do the pidyon now. So he still wants to get out of paying the Maaser Sheni, paying the chomesh on the Maaser Sheni. So here's the case in Mishna. Hey, haya omed bagorin v'ein biyado maos. So he doesn't have the money in his pocket. He's standing in the threshing floor, but his friend's with him. If he had the money in his pocket, he would give the money to his friend, and his friend would redeem it. This he gives his friend a wink and says, "All of this produce over here is yours as a gift." And his friend understands that this is just a harama, and he's not going to walk off with the produce. Now the original Baal Habayis says, and he says the Maaser Sheni here is mechulal on the money that I've got in my top drawer at home. So because now it's his friend's produce. He's the third party now, right. And he does the redemption at the regular price, not with the chomesh. And then his friend says, "Thank you very much for redeeming my produce. Here's your produce back. You can take it back now." Okay.
So they substitute the produce that's there for the money that's in the house, basically. That's what they do. Right. Okay.
Right. Exactly. So, and he can do that with the Maaser Sheni. He can say it's redeemed on the money that's in this. He's got to have specific money in mind. He's got to know where it is. Because remember, the kedusha attaches exactly to this to that money. It's actually interesting. Last night, my married daughter, phoned me asking for the procedure for redeeming for doing chumas and masras and everything. Right. She went cherry picking on Friday, so now she's got all these table cherries at home. Right. And so I talked her through it, and this is a Maaser Ani year. So she has to do so explain to her, you're going to have to do a pidyon of the remaining 10% as Maaser Ani, okay, onto a coin. Right. And I said to her, by the way, the cherries that you find in Dilvazol that are like 40 shekels a kilogram, that's not the price that you redeem it at, because that 40 shekels a kilo includes the price of the laborers who went out picking them, who were sorting out the quality, who packed them into boxes, who transported them to the store, plus the there's the retail margin that's over there. The actual value of the fruit is much less than that 40 shekels a kilo that you're paying in Dilvazol. Okay, so anyway, so I was explaining to her how to redeem it, and she said, okay. So then I just have to give money to tzedakah. I said, no, you don't just give money to tzedakah. That coin itself that you redeemed it onto, that has to go to an ani. It can't go to a yeshiva or any kind of other or a kollel or any other kind of thing, or a shul. It has to go to an ani, and that coin. So okay, so I could make a donation to Lamana Chaim, not to Lamana Chaim. You've got to give that coin to Lamana Chaim. It has to be labeled so that they don't use it for their operating expenses.
Right. So you can put it with other coins, so that's okay. That could
if you put it with other coins, if you put it with other coins and it gets mixed up with other coins, then you're going to then we're going to go back into the parasha that we learned recently about Maaser Sheni. What happens if a Maaser Sheni coin got mixed up with Chulin coins?
If you label it, you're okay. You put it with other coins and label
Got to
it, right?
label it. Put it with other coins and label it. That's fine. But then you can sell it.
There's some kind of kedusha to it, though.
That's right. That's right. And that particular coin has to go for Maaser Ani.
Right. Should you tell her? Did you tell her about joining the organization?
Yeah, but she doesn't. She doesn't have a garden, so it's not worth it for her to join the organization.
Right.
So just like once a year she goes out to pick cherries or whatever.
Right. But if she doesn't have a garden also. She doesn't have any kind of lemons or.
No, she's got nothing growing in her house. Once Bezrat Hashem, one day when she's got a garden of her own and fruit trees that she's picking and whatever, then it's kedai.
Right. Okay, we are on
base.
Reb Shimon says one may not anoint oneself with Maaser Sheni oil in Yerushalayim, but the Chachamim permit. They said to Reb Shimon, if they were lenient in a case of truma, which is a grave matter, shall we not be lenient in the case of a light up Maaser Sheni? He said to them, not so. If we were lenient in the graver case of truma, in which they were lenient in regard to vetches and fenugreek, can we be lenient in the case of a light up Maaser Sheni, in which they were not lenient in regard to vetches and fenugreek? Fenugreek of Maaser Sheni must be eaten while it is immature, and of truma. But Beit Shammai says whatever is done with it must be done in a state of cleanliness, except cleansing one's head. But Beit Hillel says whatever is done with it may be done in a state of uncleanness, except immersing it in water. I never heard of anyone eating fenugreek.
I have. I have tasted it. It's called chilbe. Chilbe, they call it here. Personally, I found it utterly revolting. But
okay, that's what I was thinking. That it wouldn't have a great taste, but it's used as a spice.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, apparently so. I did give it a try. I have a policy that I will try almost anything once. And fenugreek has had its try.
Okay. Maaser Sheni vetches must be eaten while immature and may be taken into Yerushalayim and taken out again. If they become unclean, Reb Tarfon says they should be divided among pieces of dough, but the Chachamim said they must be redeemed. And of truma, Beit Shammai says they must be soaked and rubbed in a state of cleanliness, but may be fed in a state of uncleanliness. Beis Hillel says they must be soaked in a state of cleanliness, but may be rubbed and fed in a state of uncleanliness. Shammai says they must be eaten dry. Rabbi Akiva says what is done with them may be done in a state of uncleanliness. Okay.
Zion.
Zion. Get my tissue out. Okay. I just took it out. What you said? Did you say? What did you say?
I said Trumas Zion.
I think you said something else. Okay. Okay. Let me just erase my note here. That's what I meant. Okay. Zion. If one sowed one of them, he is exempt, and the other must treat as truma. It is liable to challah. So says Reb Meir. But Reb Yossi exempts. If another person sowed the other, he is exempt. If one sowed both, it is of a kind whose seed perishes. If it is permitted, but if it is the kind of seed that does not perish, it's forbidden. If a woman was eating truma and they came and said to her, your husband is dead, or he divorced you, and likewise a slave who was eating truma, and they came to him and said, your master is dead, or your master has sold you to a non-priest, or has given you away as a gift, or he has freed you, and likewise if a priest was eating truma and it became known that he was the son of a divorced woman or a chalutza, Reb Eliezer holds them liable to the repayment of the value plus a fifth. The Reb Yeshua exempts. If he was standing and sacrificing on the altar and became known that he was the son of a divorced woman or of a chalutza, Rabbi Eliezer says all the sacrifices which he offered on the altar are invalid. Rabbi Yeshua declares them valid. If it became known that he had a blemish, his ministration is invalid. And all of them said if they had truma in their mouths, Rabbi Eliezer says they may swallow it. But Rabbi Yeshua says they must spit it out. If they said to him, "You have become unclean," or "The truma has become unclean," Reb Eliezer says he may swallow it, but Reb Yeshua says he must spit it out. You were unclean, or the truma was unclean, or it became known that this was tevel, or Maaser Rishon, from which truma had not been taken, or Maaser Sheni, or Hegdish has not been redeemed, or it lasted the taste of a bug in his mouth. He must spit it out.
Okay, that's it.
That was 3 already?
Yeah, that was 3.
Yeah, right there, that's 3 already. Right, okay.
Okay.
Shit.
All right, we're in Demai base hay.
Reb Meir says, if that which is usually measured in large quantity was measured in small quantities, the small quantity comes under the rule of a large quantity. If that which is usually measured in small quantities was measured in large quantities, the large quantity comes under the rule of the small quantity. Which is a large quantity? For dry, 3 cobs, and for moist, 1 dinner. Reb Yossi says, baskets of figs, baskets of grapes, or hampers of vegetables, so long as they are sold in lots, are exempt. One may give the poor demai to eat, and the askana demai to eat. Rabbi Gamil says used to give his workmen demai to eat. Wardens of charity. Beit Shammai says, wardens of charities. Beit Shammai says they should give the tithe to those who do not tithe, and the untithe to those who tithe. Thus everyone will eat tithe food. But the Gekommen say they collect without question and distribute without question, and whoever wishes to tithes. If one wishes to cut off leaves or vegetables in order to lighten his burden, he may not throw them away before tithing. If one buys vegetables in the market and decides to return them, he may not return them before tithing, for it only lacked counting. If he was buying and saw
When he's in the shop, the way it works is as he picks it up, he's made a kinyan.
Right.
So therefore, now he needs to, and he had paid. Now, if he wants to swap it, he's now effectively giving back untithed produce or demai to the merchant.
Uh-huh.
So that's and that's a problem. He has to tithe it at his own expense if he wants to do a swap like that.
Because once he picks it up, it's his.
As soon as if it, it's not, in our supermarkets now, we don't the derech haolam is that if you pick up something from the vegetable rack and you see, wait, there's something else that looks better, you can put it back down. You haven't made a kinyan, and if you decide that you don't want to buy this after all, you can put it back down and walk out. So it's only considered a kinyan after you've actually been through the cashier. But in the time of the Mishnah, in the time of this Mishnah, as soon as you picked it up, it was yours.
Right. So it would be better to let the cashier pick it up out of your basket.
Right. But if he's looking and just shifting through the produce, that's the end of the Mishnah over here. You want to read the rest of the Mishnah now?
Yeah. He decides to return them, he may not return them for tithing, for it only lack counting. But if he was buying and saw another better batch, he may return it because he had not yet drawn it.
Right. So in other words, if he's just shifting through the produce, he hasn't actually made a hakbah or mashicha on the produce, then he's allowed to swap it because he never made a kinyan.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay. Nagayim.
We don't think of it. We don't think of those things when we're shopping. We just
because everything goes according to the minhag hamakom.
Right.
So the minhag hamakom over here is that inside the shop you haven't made a kinyan until you actually take it to the till. Once you've taken it to the till and paid, then we say that's the kinyan. Then you put it in your cart on the other side. Now that's yours.
Vav Daled. A Baharis larger than a grist contained more than a lentil of living skin. If they grew or receded, the Baharis is tummy, as long as they do not recede below the minimum size. A Baharis the size of a grist is surrounded by living skin, the width of a lentil, and another Baharis is outside the living skin. The inner one is confined and the outer one is confirmed. Said Rabbi Yossi, the mikya is not a symptom of tumah for the outer nega, since a Baharis is inside it. If the mikya receded or disappeared, Rabbi Gamliel says if it diminished on the outer one, if it diminished, outside. If diminished on the inner side, it is a sign of expansion, for the inner nega and the outer nega become tahor. But if it diminished from the outer side, the outer nega becomes tahor and the inner nega becomes confined. Rabbi Kiva says either case is tahor.
Interesting. You see the diagram of this one is that
Right,
it's
right.
concentric rings of Beheres, Michya, and Baheres. So it depends on which way it disappears from, because we said that the pission has to happen outwards, not inwards. So if the Michya on the inner, if the Michya disappears from the inner ring, then it means the inner Beheres is expanding. So that's a pission over there. But if it goes from the outside in, then it's expansion inwards, and it doesn't, and that's not considered an expansion.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Rav. It said Reb Shimon. When is this true? When it is exactly the size of a lentil. If it was larger than a lentil, the extra area is a symptom of expansion for the inner nega, and the outer one is tummy. If it contains a dull white blemish smaller than a lentil, it is a symptom of expansion for the inner one, but not for the outer one.
That's it.
That's it.
Now on to Avos. Gimel Tes Zion.
Is it Tes Zion? Yes, I have.
Yeah, 16. Yeah.
No, no, I'm looking at a page. My tissue's on the other page. All right. He used to say everything is given with a guarantor, and a net is spread over all the living. The shop is open. The merchant extends credit. The ledger is open, and the hand writes. Whoever wishes to borrow may come and borrow. The collectors make their rounds constantly, every day, and collect payment from the person. Whether he realizes it or not, they have what to rely on. The judgment is a truthful judgment, and everyone is ready for the banquet. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, if there is no Torah, there is no proper conduct. If there is no proper conduct, there is no Torah. If there is no wisdom, there is no fear of God. If there is no fear of God, there is no wisdom. If there is no understanding, there is no knowledge. And if there's no knowledge, there's no understanding. If there is no flour, there is no Torah. And if there's no Torah, there's no flour. He used to say, anyone whose wisdom exceeds his actions, to what is he likened? To a tree whose branches are numerous, but whose roots are few. Then the wind comes and uproots it and turns it upside down, as it is stated. He will be like a lone tree in the desert, and will not see when goodness comes. It dwells in parched lands, in the wilderness, in a salty, uninhabited land. But one whose actions exceed his wisdom, to what is he likened? To a tree whose branches are few, but whose roots are numerous. Even if all the winds in the world were to come and blow against it, they could not budge it from its place, for it stated, he will be like a tree planted near water, which spreads out its roots along a brook, and does not see when heat comes, whose foliage is ever fresh. He will not worry in a year of drought, and will not stop producing fruit. Eliezer ben Kisma says the laws of bird offerings and the beginnings of menstruation cycles, these are essential laws. Astronomy and numerology are like dessert for wisdom.
That's right. You often have people who like say, like going into the gematrias of everything, and it's like, okay, it's cute, but it's
Right.
that's like dessert.
Okay, we finished August. We have more to go.
No, that was it. Yeah.
Why is it so?
You finished the parak, right?
Yeah, no, but yeah, I'm saying that it's A, so there's a B.
There's a B. That's right. That's halfway through Avos.
That's what I meant.
Okay. Yavamos. Yud Gimel Aleph.
Beit Shammai says only those who are betrothed may refuse, but Beis Hillel says both those who are betrothed and those who are married may refuse.
We're talking here about a girl who's an orphan. Her father has died, and she was married d'Rabbanan by her mother and brothers. So she has a unique ability to refuse when she reaches before she reaches bat mitzvah, to say, I don't want to be married to this guy anymore. And then she walks out, and she doesn't even need a get. The whole marriage was retroactively cancelled, and she was never married.
Because one, she's an orphan, and she's underage.
Right. So because she was an orphan, and she was married off by her mother or her brothers. who are responsible for her. So if it was her father, that would be a Doraisa, because her father can accept a Kiddushin for his underage daughter Doraisa.
Right.
But the mother and brothers can't. They're just, they're looking out for her best interests. Chazal said, okay, if they're looking out for her interests and she's happy with it, then we'll call it a marriage Darabanan until she becomes of age, and then it will naturally drift into a Doraisa marriage once she's there of her own free will. But she can do miyun up until that point and say, I don't like this guy and I don't want to be married to him, and she can walk out on the marriage completely without a get.
If there were no brothers, just sisters, and even no
So
mother.
whoever's responsible for her, whoever is responsible for her accepts a kiddushin, and she gets married off.
But if the brothers died and there are sisters and a mother, the mother would be first.
Well, the mother can accept the kiddushin for her derabanan.
And then
if there's mamish nobody left and she's like under the care of her uncle or aunts or whatever, I don't know. If that ever comes to halacha l'maaseh, please let me know.
All right. Okay. I thought then it would go to the court, something like that, the Bezdin. I don't know if Bezdin would have. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, carry on.
Beit Shammai says only those who are betrothed may refuse. Beit Hillel says both those who are betrothed and those who are married may refuse. Beit Shammai said only the husband may be refused, but not the yavam. While Beit Hillel says both the husband and the yavam may be refused.
In other words, she was underage, married to a man, and that man died, and his brother came and married this girl. So this whole thing is still derabanan, and Beit Hillel are saying that she can even do miyun to the yavam. Mm-hmm. Which Beit Shammai say no, he can't. She can't.
The person who was married to her, the brother came, the uncle came, rather. She would have
no, not an uncle. It's a brother.
Brother, it would have to do chalutza. What do you call it?
Chalitza.
Yeah, would have to do that. Chalitza? No.
She may have to wait until she's bat mitzvah to do chalitza. Yeah, the katana can't do chalitza, we said.
Okay. Both the husband and the yavam may be refused. Beit Shammai says refusal may only be made in his presence, but Beit Hillel says it may be made whether in his presence or not. Beit Shammai says only in court, but Beit Hillel says whether in court or out of court. Beit Hillel said to Beit Shammai, she may refuse while a minor, even 4 or 5 times. Beit Shammai replied, the daughters of Israel are not to be treated like promiscuous. Rather, she may refuse and wait until adulthood, or refuse and marry. Who is the minor wife who must refuse? Anyone whose mother or brothers gave her in marriage with her consent. If they gave her in marriage without her consent, she does not need to refuse. Reb Chanina ben Antignio says any child who is unable to guard her betrothal object need not refuse. Reb Eliezer says a minor's act is void, and it is as if she had been seduced. A Yisrael's daughter married to a Kohen may not eat truma, and a Kohen's daughter married to a Yisrael may eat truma. Okay.
One more.
Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov says whenever she stayed for her husband, she is considered like his wife. But whenever she did not stay for the husband, she is not considered like his wife.
So what does it mean? If the ikov is because of something intrinsic to the husband, mm-hmm. That why his wife doesn't want to live with him, it's she's got a din of his wife. But if it's akava, if the problem is not with him, Gemara, was talking about if somebody else said to her, listen, I'll be a much nicer husband to you than this guy, and she says, yeah, she doesn't. Right. Anyway, wait, hold on a second. What are we talking about? גורם לכך שאשתו הקטנה תדור עמו או תצא ממנו. מחמס תם אחרי כגון מחמס בני אדם שאינם מעוגנים לה. מה שיפה שזה בדינה אשתו. אינה מן האיש, הרי בגיל צדת, שלא להעכבה, הרי גילוי דס זה נידון כמיון. Okay. So if some other guy comes and propositions her, and she says, no, I want to stay with my husband, and then that's showing that she's happy where she is, and if she wants subsequently to do miyun, then she can do miyun. But if the other guy, if she says to him, you like, I don't like you, then what you're hearing from the Miklal love you hear from her words is saying that if this guy was a little richer or better looking or whatever, she would have left him. That's she's done a miyun on her husband already.
Okay. So
you see, so what she's saying is that she has no particular love for her husband. It's just that the guy who's propositioning her is even worse. So that's why she's not interested. Okay.
All right. Terrific. So tomorrow we will meet again.
Bezrat Hashem.
Bezrat Hashem. Okay.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Bye. Yes,
Bye.
bye.